Can't Escape the Magic by Artifacts. Chapter 23. The next morning brought clear, crisp sunshine to the city of Balbad. Clear water lapped at the ports and beaches. Swaths of red declared to the citizens of Balbad that the third prince had returned, that he was the leader of the fog troop, and that he would now treat with his brother on the behalf of the citizens. Ali Baba the Wonder is a prince? One woman cried, clutching her babe closer to her breast, face aghast with revelation. The third prince has returned! One man cried from the back of the crowd, tears cutting through the dirt embedded on his face. Ali Baba the Wonder will save us all! An elderly woman shouted with joy, raising her wooden cane with fervent happiness. Crowds of citizens began to gather happily at the castle gate. Each face was alight with joy. The third prince, the favorite of the former king, Ali Baba, had returned. Cheers rang out through the city. The streets were crowded with overjoyed faces. At the steps of the palace, citizens gathered. The air of the city was uplifted, joyful. It felt like a festival was upon the city. Colorful swaths of cloth were hoisted and waved gaily in the fresh ocean breeze. Music drifted out from windows. Bottles of secreted away alcohol were opened and generously poured to share with others. The city was already rejoicing their liberation from Ahmad's tyranny. For surely their favorite prince, surely Ali Baba the Wonder, would save them. Sina balefully watched the crowds from the hotel window. Sinbad and his friends had moved them to another luxury hotel late last night. The young boy crossed his arms as he watched the people cheering below him. A rustle of fabric behind him made him twitch. Knocked came out to his shoulder. "What's wrong?" the silverette asked. Sina refused to answer at first, deflecting the question. "What makes you think anything is wrong?" Sina asked as he kept his face towards the window. His green eyes were trained on the people in the street. He watched idly as a few men were hoisting a banner of colorful fabric over the alley below the window. They were all smiling. "You're pouting, and you look pissed," Noct noted, pulling a pillow up on the window seat next to his friend. Sina obligingly scooted over to make room, but he didn't look up at him. "I don't pout." Sina pouted and twisted his head away from Noct's metallic gaze. "Sina, tell me what you're thinking. Something's bugging you. I could tell." A tan hand reached for Sina's. Agitatedly, Sina shook his hand away, ignoring the hurt and surprised look Noct gave him. It was the first time that Sina rejected Noct in any way. It made Noct's chest ache. His eyes felt hot. "I don't know. It seems too easy for him," Sina mumbled, eyes fixed out the window. He did not notice how Noct was fighting back tears. It hurt to have Sina reject him. Sina had never pulled away from him before like this. Noct knew that Sina was a deep thinker, and that he could easily get lost in his own head. But the two of them had clung to each other since the day they had met. It was how they endured Master Fatima's treatment. They survived because of each other. The two of them were all they had. Noct had never felt this kind of ache before. It was like an expanding ball trapped in his chest, forcing his breath out to make room for it, pushing his ribs away from his body, squeezing his heart until it just couldn't beat anymore. He struggled to take a breath. His eyes burned with tears. The image of Sina was blurring. With a struggling sniff, Noct pushed his tears back and focused on the conversation. "Who are you talking about? Mr. Ali Baba?" Noct swallowed against the words. His throat was tight, eyes were still burning, his tongue tasted like copper coins. "He doesn't seem so bad." "What are you talking about? Ali Baba? No, I mean Sinbad." Sina shook his head, still staring out into the street. The men below were cheering now. They had lifted the banner. "Mr. Sinbad is nice enough. He seems like a really generous person." Noct tried to keep his voice even. Couldn't Sina tell how hard it is for him to speak? Sina nodded at Noct's words. His eyes were distant and hazy as he wondered aloud. "Yeah, he is. But why? Why would he bother helping Balbad? He's the king of Sindria. And why would he bother being nice to us or Aladdin and Morgiana. He buys us food, clothes, pays for us to stay in a nice hotel. He even bought us new toys. When's the last time you met an adult that nice?" Cinna looked up at Noct to catch his opinion. Noct was quiet for a long moment as he thought of Cinna's words. "I don't know." "He's up to something. I'm not sure what yet, but he's up to something. I don't trust him." Cinna turned away from his friend. Noct's expression twisted, then fell into a gape expression. The tan-skinned boy stood up from the pillowed windowsill. "Well, I'm gonna go get some food. Do you want anything?" No, I'm fine." Cinna's voice was soft. His mind traveled far past where Noct could ever hope to reach. Noct stared at his friend from the doorway for a minute in disbelief, his burning eyes drying a bit in confusion. Surely Cinna wasn't this stupid. Was he? Could he really not see it? That he looked exactly like King Sinbad? He had the same hair, the same chin and nose. Sure, his cheeks were thinner and cheekbones higher set on his face, and his ears were smaller, his mouth girlier, but Cinna had a remarkable resemblance to the Cinderine king. And Cinna really couldn't see that. Noct's mouth was agape. Cinna was smart. He wasn't particularly clever, but he was smart. Cinna was mature. Neither grown up, but not really. He was a bit blunt sometimes, but this level of obtuseness, it just can't be normal. Cinna wasn't stupid, but Noct was astounded that he could be this dumb. Something had to be done about this. Leaving his solitary friend to his thoughts, Noct shut the suite door firmly behind him. The young boy wandered into the main room. The three adults were sitting on the suite couches, quietly discussing something. Whatever they were talking about, the conversation died a quick death at Noct's quiet entry. Mesrour silently opened his arms to the boy. It would be easy for Noct to climb into them, to let the man hold him, comfort him in a way that nobody ever had since his mother, like what he imagined a father or big brother would be like. Mesrour was kind, but he was also big. Noct felt that he could trust Mesrour not to hurt him and to protect him from anyone who would try to hurt him. Noct stayed on his feet, ignoring the hurt look that flashed through Mesrour's eyes. Noct couldn't let Mesrour comfort him. He had to do this himself. He needed to be brave. He had to confront a king. A boy against a king. He was trembling, but Noct determinedly looked straight ahead at King Sinbad. Sinbad furrowed his brow at the little boy. It was the first time Noct had ever made eye contact with him. The tanned boy had deep copper metallic eyes, like a desert viper staring up at him. Sinbad felt a small chill chase across his shoulders. "You need to tell him," Noct demanded, flatly. Jafar, Sinbad, and Mesrour blinked. Sinbad gave the boy an easy, charming smile. "Tell who what, Noct? I'm afraid I don't know what you mean." "I'm not stupid, and you need to tell him." Noct brushed Sinbad's charm aside as easily as one would a spider's web. Jafar shifted uneasily. They had expected resistance from Cinna, not Noct. The former assassin didn't have an idea of what to expect from the normally obedient little boy. Gray eyes twisted to look at his king for direction. They didn't have a plan for how to deal with Noct. Sinbad slowly lost his grin. He had to play this very carefully. If he isolated Noct, then Cinna would hate him. He couldn't afford to alienate his son now. Their relationship was too fragile right now. And he couldn't do what Noct wanted. If he told Cinna about being his son, there was no guarantee that his son wouldn't lash out or run away. It was too dangerous now for him to risk it. He had to convince Noct not to tell Cinna. Sinbad shook his head. He was being threatened by a child. What has his life become? Noct, you know Cinna pretty well, right? His tone was gentle, soothing the boy's ruffled feathers. Yeah, he's my best friend, Noct said mulishly. He was pouting up at the king. Sinbad fought against the goo, wanting to rise up from his chest. Noct's unhappy pout was just as adorable as Cinna's. And you know exactly how protective he is of you, right? Yeah, Noct shifted closer and clambered up onto the couch, keeping a wary eye on Sinbad. Well, this is your chance to help protect him. Sinbad gestured grandly to Noct. Noct shifted a bit on the couch. Copper eyes shifted quickly to Masroor. The large man blinked at the boy, allowing Noct to make his own decisions. The silverette turned back to Sinbad. What do you mean? I want to give you and Sinna a home. In Sindria with me, with Jafar and Masroor too, and all of our friends who can't wait to meet you. I want us all to be a family. Sinbad lifted a gentle hand to Noct's shoulder, looking down at him with soft eyes. A family? Noct whispered quietly, reminded of his poor mother and how desperate she was, how poor and hungry they were until it drove her to sell her only son to the slave market and then to Master Fatima. Sinbad smiled like he knew what Noct was thinking. Yeah, Noct, a family. But if Sinna thinks that the only reason I want you to come with us is because he's my son, well, it'll hurt him very badly. Well, isn't that what you want? Noct shifted in his seat uncomfortably. Yes, I know. I do want to take care of my son, of Sinna. But I want to take care of you too, and Aladdin and Morgiana as well. But I can't do that without your help. My help? I just need you to keep my secret a little longer. Once we are safely on our way to Cinderia, I will sit Sinna down and tell him everything. I owe him that honesty. But I made a promise to help this country too, and as much as I want to tell Sinna and explain everything to him, I have to keep my promise to the people of this country. I need your help, Noct. You need me? It was one of the first times anyone had said they needed him. Sinna depended on him, but he had never said as much. The fact that Sinbad not only needed him, but would tell him as much, admit to needing his help, it meant the world to him. He felt the hard little ball of pain in his chest shrinking away. Noct scooted a bit closer to the king, and Sinbad smiled. Yes, I'll do. Will you help me save this country and protect Sinna? Noct's chest was tight and wobbly. Copper eyes filled with tears. Indecision warred in him. I don't want to lie to Sinna. And I'm not asking you to. I just need you to not tell him about who I am. Just a little bit longer, okay? Sinbad's golden eyes were wide and sincere. Noct sniffled and rubbed a hand over his damp face. Okay. With a few more comforting words from Sinbad, Masroor and Noct were making their way down to the hotel cafe. Sinbad ignored the meaningful glance Masroor gave him over Noct's head as they went. He knew he would have to deal with a Fanalise man later. While they were out, Jafar and Sinbad stayed in the suite to continue talking. The two men waved happily to Noct as they left. Immediately after the door slid shut behind them, Sinbad's entire demeanor changed. His face darkened into a fierce scowl and his body stiffened unhappily in his seat. Jafar ignored Sinbad's behavior as he stood and wandered to the bookcase. Silence had never seemed so intrusive than inside this hotel room. The tension between them was agonizing. The purple-haired man looked green around his gills. He ran a hand through his tousled hair. Finally, Jafar peered up at Sinbad from his chosen novel. So, you have manipulated a child? Jafar nodded idly. His voice was pointedly casual, his tone even and unblamingly. But that just made Sinbad more agitated. You think I don't know that? I still feel slimy for doing it. Sinbad groused at his advisor, his hands clenched unhappily in his lap. It had to be done, my king. Jafar placated. Sinbad stood roughly and shook out his arms like he was trying to shake away his guilt. That doesn't mean I don't feel guilty doing it. You've done worse. Jafar tried comforting him. No. Not like this, Jafar. This wasn't just manipulating a child. Twisting the truth to suit my needs. I've done that countless times before. That part isn't the one that bothers me. This was deceiving the only person in the world my son thinks of as family. My son, who... Sinbad's voice shuddered. Golden eyes slid shut regretfully. My son hates me, Jafar. The admittance burned in his throat like blistering sour wine. He doesn't hate you. Jafar murmured. "He just doesn't understand why you care about him so much. He'll understand everything once we get home. You just need to endure until we handle the Ballbad issue. Then you'll be able to explain everything to him clearly. It's just for a while. Then we'll get back to Sindria, and Cinna can be properly raised as your heir." "What if he doesn't want to be Sindria's first prince? What if he doesn't want to be my son?" A bit of Sinbad's anxiety shone through. He had a son. He also had a kingdom. What would he do if he was forced to choose between them? If he had to choose between what was best for his kingdom or his son? What would he do? Sinbad wasn't sure, and that terrified him. He knew that Rashid chose his kingdom over his son's, allowing his incompetent firstborn to succeed him instead of his youngest, who was an obviously better choice. It was clear that Ali Baba cared deeply for Balbad and its people, while his brother Ahmad cared only for the prestige the crown provided him. And now, because of Rashid's choice, his kingdom is on the brink of collapse because of it. Sinbad felt a bubble of panic rise inside him. What if he was forced into such an impossible choice? Then we make those decisions when we come to them. For now, we have to stay focused on Balbad. Jafar knew that it was hard to keep Sinbad on track on a normal diplomatic mission, but with the added emotional upheavals of Rashid's illegitimate son and his own discovered prince, keeping Sin focused would be next to impossible. Jafar felt a tension headache begin to pound behind his temples. "I have made contact with Sindria's official ambassadors. I'm sure you can agree that they will be a smidge more useful than us. They will be here in a few days, a week at most." "Good. Until then, let's go meet up with Ali Baba once Masrur and Nakt return. We don't want to be late for our meeting with Ahmad." Sinbad returned to sitting on the couch, his scowl lessening only slightly. "I want this mess cleaned up as fast as possible. The sooner we return to Sindria, the better. I want my son out of this city." "Son?" "You know the situation is dangerous, Jafar. This can only end in a few ways, and most aren't the best. War, civil war, mass executions. None of these are things I want my son or my country connected to." Sinbad ran a hand through his hair, ruffling the locks. "We need to finish this as quickly and cleanly as possible. It's past time to go home." "Well spoken, my liege.